City Council work study to order. And will the Deputy Mayor Pennington please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Councilmember Nutting was unable to attend tonight. Is there a motion to excuse?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Kaplan, seconded by Councilmember Musser. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay. So we have, we are now to the point of comments from the public. Comments must be limited to the items and the business of the study session per Council Rule 10. Public comment period is an opportunity for the public to comment on official city business and may not be used to promote a candidate or ballot position. For those representing a city committee, please contact the city clerk ahead of time and so we can get you placed appropriately on the agenda. When I call you up, please come to the podium, state your name and the city in which you reside for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes. The first person we have is Al Tanner.
Good evening. I'm Al Tanner. I live in Des Moines, have for 27 years. I live up on Pacific Ridge, and my concern today is about the light rail that's going to go through our neighborhood. And I've talked with our neighbors, and the neighborhood has met twice now with the light rail group, and their idea of how they're going to pass through 224th area is concerns us. And the construction, they are interested in using 224th as a major access road, staging area for trucks. Not just an occasional use. The neighborhood just doesn't feel that that street could support that kind of activity. There's 10 kids in elementary school, other kids are older, and it's, you know, a residential street that's nice and quiet. It's a dead end now. We don't have cars running back and forth. So too many trucks and things coming up there would just be too much to handle. So I encourage them to go to 221st, where the substation is. There's a staging area of an acre or two of land for them to use. Would be much better. The other issue that came up is the sound wall that they wouldn't use as they pass by 224th. They would use little 6-foot plates or some sort of sound reducing for the wheels. But the security of the neighborhood, as they start their project, they're going to cut down a huge green belt, probably an acre or two, that really divides us from I-5. And once they do that, it kind of opens up the area for people to just walk through, homeless, transients, camps and such. So the neighborhood actually needs a security wall, a cement wall that's tall, not just 6 feet. Something closer to 15 or 20 feet would do the job. So I brought a couple of letters that I wrote to Light Rail, and after our meetings wrote them the letters kind of detailing what we were asking for and what would be best for the community and the city of Des Moines. So you have those, and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bill Linscott.
Bill Linscott, I live in Des Moines. Council, mayor, staff, it would be hard for me not to pass up a comment on paid parking. We're underway, day 7 I think it is, And I just want to say that we're starting to get feedback out of the community with concerns in that, and I've worked with Joe, and I just want folks to know we're committed to working together with Joe through that process as issues are identified. And I think the city has told us that it's not going to be perfect day one, but it's going to get better from there. And there's a 45-day period where you're going to be looking at things. And so I'm working to get that message into the community. But, you know, obviously there are things out there that trouble them right now. So those will bubble up. But anyway, I again want to thank the staff and everybody, the tremendous work that went into, you know, kicking that thing off. And this weekend, I had many events down there, had staff deployed everywhere, you know, so it made it better for the public. And after, you know, some 40-plus years of having a certain framework down there they got accustomed to, it's going to take a while to get the public accustomed to it in a new format. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. And Bill Robb. Okay, thank you.
I wrote a letter. I thought this was going to be the, I live at 3028 South 224th, Des Moines, same as Al Tanner, I'm his neighbor. And I thought this was going to be Sound Transit people, but you'll just have to take out the U and count it as Sound Transit. I'm sorry about that. I'll tell you up front. So I own a house at 224th Street and want, okay, there you go. Hello, my name is Bill. I own a house on 224th Street. Sound Transit wants to use that as a construction interest. I'm asking you to please reconsider this, as there are children that walk up and down this non-sidewalk street with your contractors and subs trying to drive up and down plus park on this street, designed and constructed for light residential traffic only, not heavy machinery, large trucks going back and forth, not to mention the possible damage caused to the street and houses by the large quantity of traffic this will create. We already get a large quantity of vehicles parking on our street caused by the new hotel on Pacific Highway on 224th. This causes the children and residents to walk in the street, since the cars park in yards if not fenced off, and in walkways and shoulders. With cars parked on both sides of the street, it makes the street extremely narrow, in some areas making it dangerous to walk in while cars try to pass each other. I would also like to see the train move to a different route like 99, where there is already excessive noise. If you do continue along this route, I'm requesting that you place a sound wall to a height that at least as tall as the train to block out the noise caused by the train, or do like they do in Seattle and put it underground. I would also like to see a bond for our street to have it repaved upon completion, not patched, and any other bond to cover possible damages and additional maintenance to our homes caused by construction vehicles and vendors, to include accidents caused by vendors to our vehicles and homes, since accidents raise our insurance rates. I would like to be paid for depreciation value of our homes caused by this train going through our backyards. At present, we have a large quantity of foliage between us and the freeway. The train will make our area less desirable to live in, causing property values to go down or to stay stagnant or trail other areas without the train. For the apartments along the route, you will cause lower rents unless they are close to the station. I also want there to be no more noise or vibration than we already have. I like to be able to sleep at night and use my yard during the day. A study in 2 years to implement it without compensation is unacceptable to me and my neighbors. Compensation is not just fixing a band-aiding the problem. It's financial compensation for everyone. The problem is not, every day the problem is not fixed. I'd also like to see a bond, not your word, that the above items will be completed with. I remember you gave your word about the noise level of the train in Rainier Valley and Tukwila, because in both places they had a noise problem with the tracks. I don't know if you guys knew that or not. Oops, I got beeper. I got told to leave.
Actually, first of all, thank you for your comments. If you would like us to have a copy of your
I only got one copy that I didn't cross a bunch of stuff out on, but I can give you that one.
well, and we can make a photocopy.
Oh, that's fine. You can have it. I tried to cross out the U on the one when I got here and realized this wasn't Sound Transit.
That's fine. And I want to let the folks know who did talk about light rail. Staff is taking notes, and they will look into what your concerns are as best they can. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. Okay. That concludes the list of everyone who's decided to speak. or who signed up to speak? Is there anybody who would like to address the council over the issues that we'll be talking about tonight that didn't get a chance to sign up? Okay. Seeing no one approach, that will take us into our discussion items.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I'd like to say that I appreciate, and it's comforting to know that those cupcakes are placed in a strategically safe place, I think. Okay.
Being guarded by two police officers.
That's right.
Was that mic on?
Okay. A more serious note. So I want to cover a couple of things this evening. Just give a brief update on our aviation advisory committee. And what we've decided to do is extend out the application date until August 10th. And that will provide opportunity for the maximum number of people to potentially apply. We want to make sure that that's an available process. A couple of things we've been doing relative to aviation. One of the things is that we've engaged with the Port of Seattle and the airport relative to their international new airport concourse hard stand hold room project. And this is an infrastructure improvement facility on the airfield that will serve international passengers relative to anticipated growth. And our concern with this and comments that we made on their determination of non-significance, that process, was that it appears as though, even though they have the Sustainable Airport Master Plan is going to be their guiding document for growth in the future, and that we await the opportunity to comment on the environmental impact statement associated with the SAMP, as it's called. This appears to be a facility improvement that will facilitate growth out of context with the Sustainable Airport Master Plan, or the opportunity for communities to comment on this. So we've advised the port of our concern. We've received a response. We've requested a meeting with them next week, and we anticipate also providing access to this meeting to the cities of Burien and SeaTac if they're interested. So we'll pursue that and continue the discussion with council. The other thing, today I contacted the Washington Aviation System Plan official to kind of discuss where they are relative to that plan that we commented on earlier in the spring. I arranged to have a meeting with Mr. Hodgman down in Olympia in the next few weeks, kind of catch up where they are and what their plans are. They don't have explicit control over the operations of SeaTac, but they do have input into the Washington state, the entire state aviation system. So that's a valuable resource, and we think that we have some issues that of mutual interest to discuss. Let's see. Okay. Also, I think it's next week or the following week, there's a meeting of the Washington Transportation Commission that's going to review local kind of impacts relative to transportation. We will comment at that meeting, be on a panel, but we're also going to, or I will be emphasizing the impacts of the airport in terms of a transportation issue affecting the city. Kind of move to a slightly different issue, and I'm going to talk a little about paid parking. Appreciate Bill's comments. So, paid parking, it's been a week, but I would ask everyone to have a larger memory and look back a year ago. Okay, where were we? Okay, one word, Pokemon. All right, we're not there now, and there's been a lot involved in this kickoff of it's funny to sit across. There's been a lot involved in this kickoff of this process. I want to acknowledge a couple of things. It's a beta test, as we stated, and we're going to be looking carefully at what the impacts are over the next 45 days or longer. We appreciate inputs. We receive some inputs. But I want to recount for everyone kind of what this has been. We started last Thursday. On Saturday, we experienced a perfect storm of events, okay? We had 4 weddings in the beach park, which basically took the parking from the beach park. We had a strongman competition. I think I saw Councilmember Kaplan there. No, just kidding. At any rate, we had a strongman competition in the north parking lot that took up spaces, and there were some access issues that we had to stay on top of. I know that Scott was down there working with them. It was the opening of crabbing season, and we had the first farmers market where we were using coupons for validation. Okay, and I have to tell you, among those 4 events, and staff being there on a continual basis throughout the day at all the gates assisting people, everything went relatively smoothly. Very few complaints, very few kind of disconnects in the process. We're up on 6th Avenue, which was not, all those things being considered, if you said this is the perfect storm with the worst possible outcome, 6th Avenue was not overrun. It was utilized but not overrun, which I had the great fortune to run into Bill on Sunday and kind of remind him of that. Well, yeah, what I told him was that you were wrong. It wasn't 6th, it's 5th where I live. Was overrun. But I think that was a pretty outstanding demonstration of the commitment and energy and dedication of our staff. And I think we'll acknowledge them at some point in the future as we go forward. But as I was telling our senior staff, this is not the kind of thing that as a manager you can direct to happen or manage or supervise. This comes from the heart. And our guys did it, really good. So some of the things that are of value, one thing is that Scott was relating on Sunday, cleaning up the maintenance, cleaning up everything. There's about 50% the amount of debris you might expect. There were no needles, there were no condoms, there were no broken beer bottles. So the quality of what's going on down there is improving. And I think one thing that we can't state enough is the value of the enforcement relative to law enforcement's presence down there and just preventing problems before they start. And I have to commend our police department for an exceptional effort that they're continuing to do, presence down there, attention to what we need down there, making time within the patrol structure to spend time at the marina and be present. And that's just been fantastic. And one other thing that comes of value to us, if our maintenance costs are reduced based on the use and activity that occurs down there. Second thing is that calls for service are reduced as well. And that's $47 a pop. Is that right, Chief, I think? Right. So the reduction in calls for service, which we could say at this point is qualitative, but we will look at it in a more quantitative manner, is also resulting in savings to the operating budget of the marina and the city. So we appreciate that. I think that's about it. Some of the concerns that we've noted had to do with the turnaround in the south parking lot, that as people decided not to do the paid parking, they did a U-turn. They're encroaching on the driveway of, I think, Mariner Manor. And so that's something that we're watching. The mayor and I were just down there 20 minutes ago kind of observing that.
I wondered if some of the increased turnarounds at that south entrance were a result also of southbound I-5 being closed down to one lane, or northbound I-5 was closed down to one lane at Kent Des Moines Highway, so everyone was dropping down to try to shoot through downtown Des Moines to come up on the other side. And so I'm wondering if people were thinking, oh, well, I'll get around Marine View traffic by dropping down to 7th or 5th, or, try to even circumvent Marine View Drive, because I know that both 7th and Marine View Drive were backed up to 240th at one point. So I think that may have compounded some of that turnaround. People think, oh, I'll take a shortcut through the marina, and realizing the shortcut wasn't there. So it'll be interesting to see what happens once that construction's done, if there's some minimized kind of lost souls trying to turn around in the marina.
Councilmember Back.
Michael, do you anticipate that we're going to have staff present pretty much every weekend during the good weather until school starts, just to assist with everything? Or,
Yeah, I think, there was one, basically things have operated very smoothly. And Scott's here, the equipment has functioned, 100%. We had a slight amount of confusion last night because we had coupons for the Saturday farmers market and we had coupons for the Wednesday farmers market, and they got mixed up. So some of the Saturday ones were handed out yesterday, and what happened with that is that the machines would not accept Saturday coupons on Wednesday. So we'll clear that up. But other than that, and these guys have phones, so there's like a rotating phone in terms of you call the number and you get a response. And we've not run into the kind of problems that one might have possibly had nightmares about before this started. At least I did. So, at any rate, yeah, I think it's been very smooth, and especially the technological piece. Okay, so just moving on, I guess Patrice is not here. There's some waterland events coming up. July 21st, 23rd, Wooden Boat Show at the Marina. Friday, July 21st, Kids Carnival at the Field House. Saturday, July 22nd, the Waterland Parade. Kids start at 5:45, Grand Parade following. And Sunday, July 23rd, Wheels and Keels, car, motorcycle, wooden boat show, and at the Marina. Okay, just briefly, a few other things. I want to ask council for an opinion on an event. And do you want to do it? I was talking about the privatization.
Oh, well, I'll introduce it.
Sure.
So there are discussions about the privatization of air traffic control. And there's a meeting coming forward in the next few weeks. I was asked to attend, but I'm unable to attend. And, you know, in thinking about it and discussing it with the city manager, it may be reasonable for us to draft a letter if the council has an opinion and send it in. I have some serious concerns myself about privatizing something that is so critical to ensuring that air traffic flies smoothly over our city. And, you know, one of the things, I don't know exactly how the FAA handles air traffic control. But what I can say is the military branches of the government are really good at crossing T's and dotting I's, and they have a procedure for everything. And if that procedure doesn't fail, they have a backup procedure. That's the kind of diligence we absolutely need in air traffic control. And so I have real serious concerns about this, and I want to make sure in this process that Des Moines' voice is heard. Now, I don't know that my concerns are shared by my colleagues on the council. If they are, then I would like to move forward and instruct the staff to put together a position communication from us and sign it, move it forward. So just to make things easy, because I think everybody might have an opinion here, I'll start with Rob and move down the line around the room. So is there any comment?
I guess I don't really have an opinion. I'd like to hear more about it. I'm sure the reason is to save the money, probably, so, but I see some risk in it. But I honestly don't have an opinion whether we should take a position on that or not.
I've had mixed feelings about this. A number of countries actually contract out for air traffic control services, and it's worked pretty well, actually. The challenge, I think, here is that the FAA has already been in the process of trying to replace its outdated equipment and move to more technologically advanced equipment that is going to provide a safety level that I don't see private investment actually putting money into. In addition, you're talking about experienced controllers who basically are, you know, on retention by the government in terms of being held accountable for things, where with private industry, the accountability is a lot squishier, to say the least. I also think that this ties back to federal efforts to want to essentially de-unionize or reduce labor costs throughout the federal government. And I've got concerns about the approach being taken or the methodology being taken on that. I'm not sure we should weigh in, because I think there are some positive attributes to privatization, but I also think there are concerns. And I'm not sure that without everybody having the same information for us to be able to weigh in, trying to communicate a collective opinion is.
So for clarification's sake, though, would it be worth at least noting the concerns? I feel like being absent at the table is, in this case, I have concerns just about being absent from the table and when they're doing it. I
Well,
think
who's asking for the input?
the Port of Seattle, the Port Commission. And again, I think if we don't have to take a stand, but I think voicing our concerns may be meaningful.
Is the port gleaning this so that they've got a collective opinion to express to the federal government and the FAA? Or, I mean, where is it?
That opinion will go forward. I mean, they're seeking input from all the surrounding communities from the SeaTac airport.
Right.
And,
But the port itself has no say. They can express an opinion. The FAA and the feds make the decision in the end as to what they're going to do. So,
no, they do, and that's why I'm saying at least making the concerns heard has value.
I agree if it were going directly to the FAA. If it's going to the port, I'm not sure what, I'm
I
trying
believe
to understand what
the summary's gonna go forward. That's the best information I've got. I got a call this afternoon, and that's the top of the information. We can have, Michael follow up on that, but, you know, I'd like to hear from the balance of the council. I'll go to Councilmember Musser.
Well, and that would be, to follow up, I think there's a white paper or a timeline or some more facts that we can review it.
Right.
I do recall, during the Reagan administration, when the air traffic controllers were bumped out of their job, and that was when I think the first time a lot of the public heard about the tremendous amount of stress that these individuals are put under, and the thought of that the fact that they're unionized does help with workload, and they make sure we get their paid time off, and that they have the right number of bodies covering high traffic periods of time. And my fear is that when you're privatizing, you're looking at your gross margin, your profit level, and to what end, especially when we're looking at the increased capacity. The investment that SeaTac, our airport, is taking in increasing their capacity, how does that dovetail into changing drastically a process of landing those planes? So, I mean, what is the timeline? Is it right now that it's something that's in the federal government's budget as a cost savings idea? So somebody got a hold of that as part of a draft budget, and now all of the airports are scrambling? Or is there actually some substance to this? They want to privatize air traffic controls. So, I mean, I don't know, so when is it due to happen? Are there going to be public meetings? Is it just that right now, like I said, somebody heard a rumor and everyone's reacting to it?
Just one thing, anecdotally, one of our elected representatives at the state level, I ran into in a Fred Meyer back in February, and they were relating that one of the first things that the Trump administration had done was to solicit input from the airline CEOs relative to privatizing the FAA. So my understanding is that the port is simply, at this point, collecting testimony and information for the Port Commission relative to this issue. To what outcome, it's not, I'm not clear. We can try and find out. The only problem was their Port Commission meeting requesting this is on the 25th, and council will not meet again until the 27th. So it was just an opportunity to comment if council so desired.
Yeah, I would say more that, I think at this point, I would be comfortable with a statement saying that the council is aware of the situation, concerned of the situation, and as a city that abuts the airport, the safety of the staff and passengers coming through our skies is of paramount importance, and that we want to be given more information when it becomes available.
Yeah, I think that's probably, and we can make the statement that we have concerns, but we don't have information that,
Right.
that helps us,
Right.
make any decision.
We've had budget meetings where we've talked about, okay, well, we'll unannex portions of our city. And so if somebody had ever gotten a hold of that and they were running around and going, they're kicking North Hill out. It was something that was put out there as a budget.
Really have to put that on the table. No.
Some of us maybe just want to go, I'm just saying.
I'm kidding.
No, but I'm saying is that if somebody was to take a sheet of paper that we scribble down all the possible things we could ever do to save money as a city and then ran with that as fact, it isn't fact. And so that's why I said I want to make sure that we're not putting the cart before the horse and directing staff to put energy into something that isn't going to happen.
Again, I just want to make clear that my suggestion, and we'll keep going around, is just to say that we essentially go down the path that you're discussing, just to make sure that they know that we're aware and we are interested and we'd like more information and, you know, so forth. But,
And I think it's fair to say that we have concerns. If you were going, I think it's fair to express the fact that there are concerns.
yeah, so I'm going to keep, all right, did that conclude your, okay. So I'll go to Councilmember Banks.
So I have a lot, I get a lot of briefing notes, and so I'm going to make this really brief. Privatizing air traffic control takes away the safety aspect of how those traffic controllers are actually doing their job, to me. Because once it's private, then it's in somebody else's hands. Where's the regulation? I don't know. I'm concerned about that. So I would say, as a council member, that we should move forward with expressing some deep concerns. We just don't know where this is headed.
Right.
And as far as the details go, you realize what happens when you privatize. They're still paying, the government, we are still paying money. It's just not to wages or to health benefits. But there's a huge cost there. So I have an issue with that as well.
I'm not in favor of privatizing the public service. I've seen that in other areas in my profession, and it quite frankly doesn't work well. The level of service is poor, the professionalism is poor, and you're paying for a service that is strictly built on profits. So I'm not in favor of it. I know there's in air traffic control, there's a huge regulatory piece in terms of longevity of your time there. And they have this is your years of service or age, and then you're gone because of the safety piece built in. So I'm not in favor of it at all, just on the surface.
I'd ask if you have direction, but I just want to, what's your take from what you just heard?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like we should make, the council is saying they're okay with going forward with a letter, but it's acknowledging that we have concerns, even characterizing them as deep concerns, but at the same time, we don't have the information to know if our concerns are well-founded or not. Is that, because that's what I heard. Now, Michael, please, go with that.
So I think what I heard was that, and I think it's appropriate to comment on this process since the FAA has played into other items that have been of prominent discussion in our community and other communities, and I think all the while recognizing the limits of our jurisdiction to influence anything the FAA does whatsoever. We can be concerned, and I think we should be concerned. This is what I'm paraphrasing. We should be concerned of what the potential impacts could be, and we would like more information about them, but we have deep concerns about what they are. Is that fair?
Councilmember Banks?
I just need to clarify something. I did say briefing notes, private briefing notes. That's not accurate. They're actually bulletins that they could be public, but they come to a majority of us at the airport. So I wanted to make that clear. They're not private.
Clear for the record.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Michael?
Okay,
So is council okay with that direction?
okay,
Okay.
great. So two more issues fairly briefly. One is I want to talk a little about emergency management, just a quick update, and this will take about 3 minutes.
I saw a legislative update.
Yeah, legislative update is going to be postponed until there's some outcome in Olympia. And we talked with Senator Kaiser yesterday at the opening of the picnic shelter and also of the restrooms, and it's just a wonderful event yesterday. One more kind of link in the chain of the beach park renovation, and very, very wonderfully done. But her position was that, we're probably in good shape as soon as they pass the capital budget, and don't hold your breath because maybe they pass it next session. So, and this all has to do with something completely unaffected or related to us, and that's water rights in eastern Washington. So there seems to be a cleavage in terms of the Republicans and the Democrats as to how to resolve that, and she was not optimistic that would be resolved in the short term. So we're still monitoring that, but we really have no more update other than that. Emergency management, this is the National Academy back in Emmitsburg, Maryland. A number of people here in this room and also within the region are going to go back there at the end of August. Mayor will be there, deputy mayor will be there, police chief will be there, Dan will be there, Brandon, Scott. I think that's about it from within the room. And others, and I'll be there, right. And so this is a process through which, by going to the National Academy, it provides a whole bunch of things. Provides training, provides the opportunity for interaction with your colleagues within the region, so you establish that contact communication, know who you're talking to on the phone in the case of an issue. This time it's interesting, it's going to highlight the recovery process. I think that we had groups go back there previously, and there's been more on the first responders' role. This is transition from first responders to the recovery piece that would occur, which is especially involves things like building official and public works and others. And so we're going to try and develop coordinated responses, and I think that that's going to really accelerate our capacity as a region to respond to issues. So I just want to let you know that we will provide a very comprehensive update to council when we return. Des Moines, okay, reimbursed travel, training. Great. I think I covered it all without ever seeing that slide. Please.
You know, the one comment I'd like to make is that for a long time, at least in my memory with the councils, we've been talking about advancing emergency management in the city. And this is another step where we are taking the program forward. And so I'm delighted. I know that we've done things like we added a generator for an emergency shelter should we need it. We've done a lot of things, but the team is coming together now. This will be focused on the recovery after an event. We are articulating the value of our marina and what that could mean to the region. And I think we're doing, this helps you figure out when something happens, really who's on first. Instead of wondering, we know. And so I have to thank Deputy Mayor Pennington and our police department for coming together and bringing this thing forward. It's the maturing of Des Moines, and I'm just really, really happy that we're going forward with this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And so the last thing on sort of admin report emerging issues right now, I'm going to ask Dan Brewer to talk a little about the Ecology Fund that was set up by the Port of Seattle, kind of as a response to the tree cutting that they've been involved with.
Yeah, just a really brief update. I've been working with the port, a team at the port on how that process will work. There's a representative from CTAC and Burian also on that committee. And the good news is that program is out on the street now. You can go to the port website and get information about the Airport Community Ecology Fund, or the ACE Fund as they're calling it. It's a program for small matching grants for environmental or ecology improvements within the communities, within the 3 communities. The grant applications are due September 1st, and the port is going to have a kind of a open house kind of a meeting here in Des Moines at the police station on August 7th from 5:30 to 7. So if you are interested in participating or submitting an application to the program, you'd probably want to attend that. The program is open to nonprofit organizations within the city, or the work has to be done within the city. The city itself is not eligible to apply for these funds, but the projects have to be completed on public properties. That could be city property, school district property, or any kind of public asset. Whatever improvement is occurring would be on public property. So much more to come on this. It looks like they will make award notification sometime in October, and if you are interested in doing a project here in Des Moines, one of the things that's important for you to do before the applications are due is to contact our permitting center, Susan, and just describe your project so we can give you some feedback on what permits might be needed, because that's part of the application process. And some projects may not need any permitting at all, but it's important to get some feedback from the city as to how viable what you're proposing is within the city, if it's on city property. So that's all I have on this for now.
Yeah, is a city right-of-way considered city property? So like an HOA is a nonprofit, so if an HOA wanted to apply for the funds and make an improvement to a city right-of-way, that would be considered?
Yeah, though, I think that those are the kinds of things that would be considered. Anything that's environmentally or ecological focused.
Mm-hmm.
And in the grant application, it talks about types of projects that are examples of what they're looking for.
Okay.
So.
Thank you. I think next on the agenda, what we would like to do is ask Chief Delgado to introduce the discussion relative to evidence-based policing. And I just want to say, personally, I've been having a chance to do some ride-alongs with the officers. I plan on doing a whole bunch more of them. But to the degree anyone has doubts about the quality of our police department, they can put those to rest, because we have an incredible, outstanding group of officers and leadership. It's great to see Commander Jenkins here, Assistant Chief Bull, and just the sort of positive, perspective that our cops have as you see them before their shift, through the shift. It's awesome, and to see their interaction with the public is just it's quality, it's professional, and I think they do a great job. So it's kind of introduction for you, Chief.
Thank you, Michael. A little bit about this. The evidence-based policing concept was born out of the data-driven efforts that Michael, Mayor Pina, Deputy Mayor Pennington, I gotta get the deputy and the pro tem thing out of my head. But we talked about change that needed to happen. We talked about violent summers. We talked about approaches to policing based on our staffing levels, how we can do it better. We talked about best practices. We talked about community involvement, policing, different things, and partnerships in the region. And in putting that together, the command team came upon, through a lot of tenacious work by, he's not here, but Commander Mike Gradden. Evidence-based policing was born in our city. It's a concept that's taken off. Mike attended a conference in Arizona, and the folks that developed evidence-based policing as a concept back in the DC area at George Mason University have recognized our department's efforts. They're very happy with what we're doing. We're in conversation with them about how we can do more in the region to spread the word. It's not just about evidence-based principles, those that Assistant Chief Bull will take into consideration, but it's really rolling up our sleeves and becoming better regional partners, utilizing our resources better, and really getting the community involved in what we're doing. I think some folks are seeing a little bit of that in the approach we took to policing in the marina, and not ignoring the rest of the city, because it's the principles that Chief Bull will discuss tonight that are allowing us to be so effective down in the marina, while not ignoring the rest of the city, in fact, being effective throughout the city. So without further ado, go ahead, Mayor, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to tap off, when you talk about using our resources better, you're not just talking about our agency, law enforcement agency resources. You're talking about the resources that we have in the city to collectively partner and work with you to be more effective. Is that correct?
I'm glad you said that. I was speaking directly about the police department, but what you're saying is absolutely true. This wouldn't be effective if it wasn't for the rest of the departments within the city. Our city attorney, Tim George, our chief operations officer, Dan Brewer, The teams have been just absolutely, Brandon Carver, everyone's been a major player in this. And it's through rolling up our sleeves together and developing a practice that we will then transfer to every part of the city. It's how we do business now. It's not just policing, it's how we roll up our sleeves and work together to solve problems in the city and take whatever issues we're dealing with within a major problem and dissect it and better have an approach to eradicating that issue so we create better quality of life in our city. That's what it's about. And that's why everyone has an equal voice in it, and that's why we're so effective in such a short time and what we're going to see continued effectiveness throughout the city. And I'll pass that on to Assistant Chief Bull.
Evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members, director, staff, members of the community. Bob Bull, Assistant Chief. We're here to talk about evidence-based policing. First thing we're going to do is kind of talk where our objectives are tonight. We're going to define evidence-based policing. We're going to identify where we currently are with evidence-based policing, and we're going to identify where we're going with evidence-based policing. So evidence-based policing is a method of making decisions about what works in policing. Okay, it means that research, evaluation, analysis, and scientific process should have a seat at the table in law enforcement decision-making about tactics, strategies, and policies. It is proactive rather than reactive. Okay, it's tailored and focused rather than general in nature. And it's place-oriented as opposed to focused only on people and reactive arrests. So we're not just focused on people making arrests. So it's a little bit bigger than that. Examples of evidence-based policing is hotspot policing. It's kind of an umbrella term, just like evidence-based policing is. It's kind of what it is research shows that identifying and formulating a strategic response to hotspots can reduce crime in both the hotspots and surrounding areas. So it's kind of what it is. You're really kind of a hotspot. You're trying to really pick out those hotspots and concentrate on those hotspots to reduce crime. Then you have the micro hotspots. Okay, those are crime that is concentrated in specific locations and individuals responsible for a majority of the crime that's occurring in those areas. This is shifting tactics to target on true source at a micro level, kind of like problem addresses, street blocks, or repeat offenders. Then you have the place-based approach. Okay, this is focused on places, not people. There's something about the place that leads to crime occurring. So you're focusing on the soft crimes like garbage, abandoned vehicles, graffiti, or code enforcement issues. The last strategy is predictive policing or forecasting, where we need to be when, simply anticipating and preventing crime. Okay, this is where our crime data analytics software and the crime analyst is going to come in and make a huge role in making that happen. So we always know that in December, our burglary rate increases. Why? It's the holiday season, so burglary's on the rise. So based off the crime, analytics software, the crime analysis, we can kind of pinpoint where we think that might occur, and then we can focus on those areas. So we look at the crime analytics software. Okay, so what we do is we can have certain type of parameters we can put in with the software, like types of crimes, the days, the weeks, the months, that produces what we call hotspots, or areas that are concentration of high calls for service, so to speak. Then the blue kind of represents kind of the cool down areas where we have a decrease in that type of thing. So obviously for us, we want to concentrate on those areas that are the hotspot areas for whatever type of crime that we're kind of doing some research on. Optimizing our deployment of resources. I think the Chief Delgado mentioned this. We're going to optimize our deployment of how we're going to use our resources. This is kind of called, they call it the Koper curve. It was named after criminology professor Christopher Koper. And what he says is proactive 10 to 16 minute stops every 2 hours in hotspots, maximizing deterrence. So kind of what he's saying, that according to him, the likelihood of a crime or disorder occurring within 30 minutes after a patrol drive-through was about 15%. So in other words, when a car drives through your neighborhood, in that first 30 minutes, Another crime that's gonna occur is about 15%. Okay, but he says by doing the 10 to 16-minute stops, within those, 10 or 16-minute stops, the likelihood is reduced down to 4%. So big difference that way. So some of the other benefits of the Koper curve theory, what they call it, is beyond just crime reduction. Okay, in addition to reducing crimes in the hotspots, using this principle helps guide deployment as a patrol strategy and makes better use of officer time. It also increases visibility and positive community engagement within the hotspots. Agencies are likely to enhance community trust and may further impact crime reduction and improve satisfaction. So there's more benefit of that, yes.
I'm sorry, for clarification on the one where you showed the hot spots and the cool spots?
Mm-hmm.
Is that based on daily, weekly, monthly? What's
We could do that either way.
either way?
Yeah, we can put the parameters of how we want it. So
Okay.
we want to capture a week, we can capture a week. We want to capture a day, we can capture a day. So it's whatever type of data that we're looking at to help deploy the officers that way. So what the officers do when they're in these hot spots matters. They're working on identifying why the crime is occurring, and they're trying to identify what needs to be changed. And some of these things we're already doing. I mean, it could be, does the Wi-Fi need to be shut off after hours? Okay, do exterior outlets need to be removed? Is there more supervision needed? Is more lighting needed? Does liquor need to be locked up at the stores after 2 a.m. or maybe just moved away from the front doors? Are valuables left unattended or in sight? Are locks being used? And does a civil code need to be enforced? So it's not just sit there when they're doing this 10 or 60 minutes, they're actually observing and figuring out what the reason, what needs to be changed to be able to fix the problem. In our steps of implementation of this program, our police personnel completed the learning modules on evidence-based policing. We partnered with Highline College and George Mason University to bring Dr. Cynthia Lum out for a seminar on evidence-based policing. She's a nationally known expert in regards to evidence-based policing. It was an honor. I mean, it was nationally known that she was coming out to Des Moines to do that presentation. Attended the inaugural conference for evidence-based policing. We expanded the library of print and e-resources on best or better practices. We joined the American Society of Evidence-Based Policing. We began networking with experts, academics, police leaders, and practitioners on evidence-based policing. We obtained our crime analytics software. We increased our crime analyst training and knowledge to increase our knowledge. We did the Lean Six Sigma training. That's a typical, you have certain processes, every work has different type of process, and police department's no different. So what we did is looked at our processes and how better we can actually make them more efficient. It's kind of an efficiency study. So we did that as well. We have the Lexipol policy manual. Obviously, we've been having that for years. And the advantage of that is update, it's current, it's new, it's viable, it's up to date. It's very, very beneficial. Yes.
On the analytics software,
Right.
who's doing the analysis? Is it at the sergeant level? Is it at the command level? I mean, where?
Well, right now, we're going to try to get it out to everybody. We're in the process right now. At this point, we have it set up that we only get our actually report data that's in the system right now. So we only get the information that's actually report driven. And so I'm right now working with Motorola, which is actually the parent company and them. I'm now getting this really, really close, getting all our call data in there as well. So not only are we going to have our crime reports, but every one of our call for service is going to be dumped in that system. So we can identify a lot of the quality of life issues that are not really reports to be able to help deploy our staff.
What do you do with the non-Valley Com contacts?
Such as,
When someone calls,
Normandy Park.
no, when someone calls using the non-emergency line.
well, if it is a call for service, we will always direct them to call 911 to make the call. But even if it's like somebody comes in and maybe the record specialist, hey, run out to that, the officer will actually create a call saying, hey, I'm going out to look at this. So more than likely, they will still create a call by going out to whatever issue they have. Maybe an issue of a parking issue or something like that, and they'll put themselves out at that parking complaint at such as a location, so we still capture that. That makes sense?
That's what you're saying.
Yeah. Obviously, being a Waspik State accredited police agency, and that's just merely more because we have all the Washington State sheriffs and police chiefs think that how a police agency is best run, that you're running professional and stuff like that. And we're obviously being state accredited. We are what they considered a professionally ran police department. What doesn't work? Random patrol equals random results. Gut feelings, rumors, urban legends. And because we've always done it that way, you know, because there's just no stats or nothing that we can say that we should do it because of this reason. There's no analysis, no nothing, it doesn't work. So what works and what are we doing? Well, the federal government knows it works because they have what's called a bulletproof vest program that we take advantage of. And what that is, they're saying that by their analysis, their statistics, if an officer wears their bulletproof vest, they're less likely to get killed. So therefore, if you want to take part and help them fund your vest, not only do you have to have a mandatory wear policy, which we do, provide every year, but we also have to purchase the type of vest that they only approve, based off their statistical analysis. So that's kind of how that comes in, based off their information. So they know it works, and that's why we do that. The Washington State Traffic Highway Safety Commission, we get grant funds from them. Why? Based off their analysis, their stats, they're saying if we deploy a certain amount of officers at a high visibility patrol to concentrate on DUIs, distracted drivers, we know it's going to reduce, therefore it's going to create a safer driving environment for everybody. That's kind of a concept of evidence-based policing. Model policies, that's the best practices, okay? We're there, we have our up-to-date policies, we're doing that. We got the CPTED, crime prevention through environmental design as part of that. Graffiti abatement, we all know that graffiti abatement, they statistically say if you get graffiti on your property, if you take care of it right away, and keep taking care of it right away, if it happens again, you're less likely to have it happen to you again. So that's why it's very important that if you get it, clean it off, and just be vigilant about it. Just keep happening and keep cleaning it off, and sooner or later it's going to go away. Code enforcement as a means of crime prevention. And partner with businesses. Okay, many of the things we already been doing, we didn't realize were actually evidence-based policing principles. Look at the Woodmont Library, for example. We all know some of the issues that Woodmont Library was having. Okay, the solutions did not happen overnight. Okay, we had times where we finally get them, we signed the trespass letter admonishment program, where they got in our admonishment program. That helped the problem, right? But then they started having people in their parking lot all the time. Okay, and we found out they're using their Wi-Fi. So they got to turn the Wi-Fi off. That helped the problem with that. Then what happened, they had people camping out in their parking lot. So what they do, they put a gate up. That helped with the problem with that. Then they fixed the problem exterior, now they're moved on the interior. So what they do, they hired off-duty officers. Okay, so we got there and our off-duty started going there. And they were doing that 10 to 16-minute patrol, like the Cooper theory said, right? They identified, well, not having problems inside, but they're having problems in the bathrooms. Okay, so they said, well, we got people sleeping in the bathrooms, they go in there, they bathe themselves in the bathroom. They're not really the patrons using the bathroom. So what do? They lock the bathrooms now. You have to get a key. Okay, so all these things are happening. Now they've even reinstalled their camera system down in the library system. So they're doing all these different things to do it. And what has happened, many officers now on a first name basis with the staff down there. And when they respond, they got immediate trust down there. Because remember what we talked about, the advantage of the Cooper or the Cooper curve theory, okay? Enhance trust, improve satisfaction. There's a true example of how that works. We all know this location, 2800 block of South 216th Street. This location was heavily wooded, provided a secluded location for the drug dealing and hiding place for criminals looking for victims. The clearing of this lot eliminated this crime element in this neighborhood. Okay, this was a city-wide effort and success, and should be recognized as a model of a place-based approach with identified focus area of evidence-based policing. Okay, again, we identified the problem, we addressed it. Okay, we can't thank the staff partners enough for what we learned from this and the safety impact it has on our community. Pacific Ridge is not a bad neighborhood. There are good people living up there. It just has some bad pockets that we just need to address. We continue to look at unique and innovative ways to partner with our community to keep all the Des Moines livable. Our community video partner program is a great example of a deployment strategy to form community partnerships and reduce crime. At this point, we have 29 separate locations that are actually registered in our program. Those are locations themselves, not just cameras. So some location has multiple cameras, but we're always looking for more. So if you actually want to register this program, just go to the city website, go on the police department, there'll be a link to register your camera. So what's next? We're going to identify who we are as a police agency. So we're going to identify and focus on clear, specific goals, kind of the pillars of our agency. In other words, what are we setting out to do? We're going to normalize it into our organization, institutionalizing the efforts, infusing mindful evidence-based practices from recruiting to selection to our police training officer program to our program evaluation. We're going to decentralize it so it becomes the culture of our organization. So in other words, it's not just going to be command level doing it. It's not just going to be the supervisors going to do it. It's going to be everybody in the organization is going to be doing this. We're going to continue to evaluate our programs. We're going to try them. We're going to test them. We're going to evaluate them. And if it doesn't work, we're going to scrap it, regroup, and move on. Okay, we've all heard about the OSERA model. Remember the OSERA model is a community policing program where it's a scanning, analysis, response, and assessment, right? So you're scanning, you're identifying the problem, so your analysis of why the problem occurring, you're going to respond to what you can do to fix the problem, and then you have the assessment, did it work? Okay, and it works. Okay, if you remember back when we had the crime task force team back in 2008, 2009, that was kind of the model that we went for, and it worked. And when we identified the problem, we went out there and we fixed the problem. The problem was it didn't have what the evidence-based policing has on it, and that's the S for sustainability. We have to be able to have sustainability. And evidence-based policing puts that sustainability on it. The Woodmont Library, all the things that they've done is now sustainable. We talked about, the city manager earlier talked about the marina issues. Okay, I've been with the city for over 27 years. Okay, the marina has been one of those things that I've been dealing with since my tenure here, about issues that have been going on down there. And the city's always been taking multiple steps to kind of fix that problem. Okay, I mean, they used to have nighttime security, full-time nighttime security down there. They put gates up. They did additional signage up down there. We had directed patrols down there. We put cameras up there. And did it fix the problem? No, it made it better, but didn't fix it. And I would have to say, based off of progressive out-of-the-box thinking of the paid parking, for me in law enforcement, I think you've now made it sustainable as far as curbing the problems you have down there, as far as kind of an evidence-based policing principle. I just think that is, for me, I think it's fabulous. I think it's going to curb a lot of the issues that we have down there and the response that we're going to be needed to go on down there. Not to mention, it's great because it's a plus because you're actually generating revenue to fix the bulkhead. So I think it's a win-win. So we don't have all the answers, but we need to kind of learn and adapt to changing times. We can't abandon our traditional policing and officer experience and knowledge. The challenge lies in change for both the officers and our community. Any questions?
No questions, but a comment. I I love this approach. It's holistic. It looks at systems, it looks at people, it looks at places. It doesn't just focus on what I would consider to be traditional approach to doing things. And it's creative. It allows for some creativity in terms of problem solving. And I don't think that you get enough of that in most agencies. I appreciate the fact that I think this helps cement our accreditation with the state in terms of being on the cutting edge, and at least in terms of police agencies within the state, in terms of demonstrating the types of things that we are able and willing to do and commit to try and achieve a better, safer place for our residents. So I just want to say thank you for helping to make sure that this makes it down through all of the staff. So,
Councilmember Banks?
To echo a little bit more with what Dave said, I think the collaboration with other departments in the city, I think the start of that, which was that area up on 29th, really lends to that true collaboration. And I think reaching out to businesses and the communities, not just up there, but everywhere. Like you said, I love that. And you enhance trust, you improve the satisfaction, but you improve the relationship too. So I think this is really a great effort, and I can see this being very sustainable. Thank you.
Councilmember Back?
At the presentation at the college, when we were talking about this, one of the questions that come up about the collaboration with our neighboring cities and sharing of information, and if they're not using evidence-based policing, there could be vital information that's happening just beyond our border that really affects us. And so what do you do, or what are the plans as far as collaborating with Normandy Park,
Yeah.
Erie, and SeaTac Kent?
Well, we're already doing that now. I mean, we already have, our Tanya Seabury does a lot of our crime analysis stuff, and she goes to weekly intel meetings. So whatever type of intel that we have, we share that intel with all those other agencies around our jurisdiction.
And we get information from
Yes,
them?
yeah, it's mutual shared, exactly.
I'd just like to add to that a couple of things, I think one thing that's really good about this approach is I think that it allows skill sets to be devoted to application where those skills are needed, And I think one of the skills that our chief has is really great ability to work with what I call the external environment, other agencies, other communities, kind of out the aspect of policing to focus on outside of the police department specifically, okay? And so just along those lines, I mean, we've had multiple conversations with Normandy Park about ways that we can share responsibilities and resources and be more efficient. Recently, I know I attended a discussion the chief had organized with the new chief of the Port of Seattle, Chief Covey, and talked about ways, especially in terms of things we have in common, for example, the business park, and how is that relationship going to be formalized, implemented, and effective. And those kinds of discussions, I know the chief was in Kent today with the police chief Thomas over in Kent. And so those are ongoing aspects of this approach. And I think I really appreciate that because, with our kind of constraints on force, yet the size of problems, we need cooperation with SeaTac and Federal Way and Normandy Park and Burien and the Port of Seattle and the regional efforts that occur in King County and the South King County, the Chiefs Association, Violent Crimes Task Force. There's a whole bunch of ways that we're trying to take advantage of this. And I think recently the addition of a detective position specifically for Violent Crimes Task Force enhances our ability to get real-time information and to act on it and provide intelligence in both directions and all that. So I wanted to enlarge in that a little because I think it's a very effective component of what we're trying to accomplish.
I've been out in the community quite a bit recently and talking about this program. I didn't have the details that you've provided tonight, but the overall concept as has been presented to us prior. And it's nothing but positive. People can get their head around it, they understand it, they see why it works. And so I think that's really a good thing, because that's building confidence in our community, because we've been through some tough times. The other thing is that in being out and about, and especially when I've been out at events outside the city, I've had the opportunity to meet with folks from other agencies and attorneys that have said to me, when they get a case from the city of Des Moines, it's rock solid. They know that the homework has been done. And, you know, all it does is make me proud. I think that our officers, and not just the officers, everybody in the agency, but the officers have a special place with me in that anybody who's willing to get up every day and heavily fortify themselves for our safety needs, I mean, you guys deserve, respect doesn't seem like enough, you know, and so I'm very grateful. But all the support personnel that are behind that, making sure this happens as well. I know this is a professional agency. I know it's well-run. I know that everyone that's out there is doing their best, and I'm seeing change. And the way that you guys have partnered with the other agencies within the city and surrounding areas is just, it's one heck of a testament to the leadership and the foresight here. So I can't say enough in terms of positive things for this agency, and kudos to everyone. Any other comments? Okay, Michael, that takes us forward.
Okay, and with that, thank you, Chief, Assistant Chief Bull, Commander. We're going to talk about the Sound Transit Federal Way Link Extension. I'll turn it over to Dan Grant. Turn it over to Grant, who we're glad to see back and engaged here.
He seems a little more tan than usual. Has he been on vacation again?
Just looks that way. What we have tonight is our 12 slides, which basically summarize kind of where we are, where we've been, and where we're going for the remainder of this year. And what we'd like, as we go through this material, we'd like to kind of test our approach against the council to see if it kind of makes sense, see if there's anything where we're getting off the rails or slipping out of our lane. Invite your feedback and policy direction. Just a quick historical review. ST2 approved the extension of light rail through Des Moines in 2008. And then in November last year, ST3 was approved, which extended the light rail from Kent Des Moines Station area to Federal Way. Back in 2013, or prior to 2013, Sound Transit went through an extensive analysis looking at all the different ways to get from the South 200 station to a station in the Kent Des Moines Midway area. And out of that analysis, a whole bunch of alternatives were kind of set aside, and 4 alternatives were left, which were the basis for the EIS, which then began. Out of that EIS process emerged a preferred alternative, thanks in large measure to the efforts of former Mayor Kaplan and his work with other corridor city mayors. That then kind of moved forward as a preferred alternative. The final EIS, the draft EIS and final EIS were done, and the Sound Transit Board approved the project to build last January. And then the mitigation, the environmental mitigation, which was part of the EIS process, was reviewed and approved by the 2 federal agencies identified there in March. So the environmental mitigation is kind of guaranteed by the federal government. and they'll be monitoring that throughout the project to ensure that that mitigation is incorporated into the design as part of the process. The notice to proceed, we're in the process of developing the request for proposal for the design build contractor, and that notice to proceed will be issued in the summer of 2019. That then begins finalizing the design process, which then will lead to construction, which then will lead to finish of construction in about 2023, and then a year of getting the system ready to open for service in 2024. We should explain that this project uses a design build contractor, which unlike the normal projects which we do, which are design bid build. So there's a design, it's finalized, that's put out to bid, the low bidder then is awarded a construction contract. In a design build scenario, a design build team is selected. They then complete the design based upon the project requirements, which are identified in the solicitation. That design is then approved by the Sound Transit staff and its team of consultants, signed off on by the feds and by the corridor cities.
Question, Grant. So the Federal Way construction will begin in 2024.
No, it opens for service in 2024. Everything begins from South 200 to the Federal Way Transit Center. All is awarded in the same contract.
Right, okay.
So we have 3 agreements in place with Sound Transit now. One is a memorandum of understanding that was executed between the CEOs of our respective organizations. It was the basis on which the Sound Transit Board kind of decided the project to build. So it demonstrated how each of the corridor cities was following and implementing the direction by the Sound Transit Board when they approved the preferred alternative. It also committed the city, and state law requires this anyway, it formalized the city's commitment to use the Federal Way Link Extension EIS as our environmental document, as if so we don't have to do any additional environmental work associated with our review and approval of the various aspects of this project. We also entered into a service agreement with Sound Transit and a task order which covered reimbursement of city services in 2017. And as you can see there, it provides for about 1,400 hours of reimbursable city staff services. It establishes a not-to-exceed price of $165,000 with a 10% contingency on top of that. And through June, Danielle and her staff have kind of pulled all the staff time together and consultant costs, my costs, and Lynn Madsen's costs for working on this project. And we submitted an invoice to Sound Transit for $78,000, which is about 43% of the amount in this $165,000 not-to-exceed level for the first 6 months of this effort. We also entered into a letter of concurrence Dan signed off on the city road design standards, just to kind of pin that down as well as we could, as early as we could. Our city services agreement, as I mentioned the scope and the value of that, but basically it supports 3 types of effort on the part of city staff. One is we refer to as over-the-shoulder review. To do the design build solicitation requires a set of project requirements that then are incorporated into the request for proposal. And that's basically the specs at a pretty high level. So we're being fed sections of that every other week for review and comment. And our comments will then inform the way these are incorporated in the initial draft of the RFP. We'll have a chance to look at that RFP in draft form. We'll be able to comment on that, then they'll do a final RFP. We'll have a chance to look at that as well before it's issued to the private sector. We also have a series of supporting agreements that will be incorporated by reference into the RFP, and I'll talk about those more in a little bit. And then the service agreement also provides for our costs to do things like update you folks, the City Council, to bring forward municipal code changes that are needed to basically allow us to review and approve the designs that are being developed by the Sound Transit Design Team. The next two slides basically kind of go over what's in the request for proposal as project requirements, and they're divided into kind of 8 categories. One is roadway related, and it deals with construction and maintenance of city traffic and detours and restoration of haul routes, some of which were addressed by members of the public this morning. So Brandon and his team are looking at the drafts, providing comments. Will be very specific and prescriptive in terms of our comments and how we believe that should be incorporated into the roadway-related parts of the project requirements. We have drainage, stormwater management, and management of pollution. We have other utility-related issues such as power and specialty equipment. We have the real estate and right-of-way, which deals on a parcel-by-parcel basis with every parcel along the guideway, including the vacation of the city rights-of-way. So we'll be required to vacate certain parts of city right-of-way, and we'll be laying out in the project requirements exactly how that all will happen. Len Matson's kind of the providing the micromanagement of this particular issue, dealing with each parcel, each affected property owner, and the way in which we communicate with those property owners and the people across the street from the people who are directly affected. Continuing with the RFP project requirements, there's certain things that will need to be clarified, some of which are simply interpretations on how we typically interpret the code. Others may lead to a need to kind of do some minor refinements on the code. There are permit-related sections that deal with how we're going to consolidate the permits, how they're going to be submitted, reviewed, when self-certification is appropriate on specialty items which are kind of well beyond our level of experience or, quite frankly, interest because they're train-related and the construction inspection. We have landscape and buffer-related issues, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second, having to do with the landscape, the buffer, the plant material, irrigation, fencing, wetlands, buffers, tree removal and replacement, noise mitigation. There's a whole set of things associated with this buffer area that are going to require a lot of attention. It's probably taking the most time of the staff effort at this particular point. Yep. Sir.
So earlier tonight, we had comment about that specific issue. So are you saying that we actually that we will get to provide input and we can have an effect on that?
Absolutely, yes. And we'll be, as I'll be explaining here in a minute, we're going to be bringing a couple ordinances forward that basically change parts of our code dealing with this issue. So council will have a bite at that apple. That will require its own environmental review. And then, of course, we'll have an opportunity once the design builder is selected and they bring forward the final design, we'll have another chance to look at that. And there'll be public neighborhood opportunities to comment on both the development of the project requirements. And there's 2 public meetings set up on the 7th and 14th of August to get feedback from the most directly affected parts of the Pacific Ridge neighborhood. And then there'll be opportunities again once the design build contract is awarded.
Now, those meetings will be put on by Sound Transit.
They'll be jointly hosted by Sound Transit and Des Moines. We'll go through a noticing process, much like we do with other city activities. So we have a rather extended mailing area. We've identified the affected parcels, whether they're owner-occupied or tenant-occupied. So we'll try to cover both the ownership and the tenants that will be affected as we move forward.
Councilmember Back had a question as well.
So Grant, thinking about the 2 comments earlier, so obviously the concern is property values, and I know there are transit-oriented development opportunities, so can you give us a sneak peek of what those opportunities are going to be, that there is actually an increase of property value that is a potential for people that live near a light rail?
Most of the acquisitions between 216th and 221st are all single occupant, owner-occupied homes. And the goal is not to acquire any more property in this area than is required for the project and to meet city code. Then there's this section that's kind of south of Puget Sound Energy, includes the multifamily properties. Again, the same kind of objective, minimize the impact on those privately owned properties. And then there's, at the very southern end of the guideway area, is the King's Arms. And the plan is to acquire all of that, and there may be, it's expected there'll be remnants of that property left over that can be repurposed for commercial property or other transit-oriented development activities. The remnants are going to be fairly modest, we expect. So it's unclear as to kind of what kind of development that those parts, the remnants would in and of themselves provide, but it may be a catalyst for a property owner to acquire adjoining property to do a larger project.
Just to add on to that, we do have a project that actually we had a pre-construction meeting on yesterday that Susan and Brandon were at. It's Highline Place, across from the college and basically right across from the station area, which is considered a transit-oriented type of development. So I'm happy to say we have the first transit-oriented development on the corridor under construction. I'll take credit for that. So, so anyway, they're going to start doing grading work, and they'll be under construction here soon. And so down around the station area, there's really a good opportunity for that kind of development to occur. We did do some zoning work maybe a year and a half ago in that area, the transit community zone, to help facilitate transit-oriented development.
And that's the property just north of the little driveway into Baskin Robbins, into the college east parking lot. Okay, so looking forward, the city council is going to have kind of multiple bites at parts of this project. We're going to be developing a development agreement and a transit way agreement, both of which have to be approved by the city council. Transit way agreement is a franchise agreement that basically allows this project to run through our city, much like we do for cable companies and other things where they're going to use public right-of-way. And plus, we're finalizing a landscape code ordinance. We're picking up work that has been done on the essential public facilities ordinance, which was done a year ago. Susan's picking that up, and And there's a section in there that specifically deals with this Federal Way link extension, but there's also the things that were triggered in large part by the Woodmont recovery project. And then we're using this opportunity to kind of fix some things in our non-conforming buildings and uses code that basically say if there's an essential public transportation facility project and it requires us to take some of your property, we don't want to penalize you by restricting your use of that property in the future. So that's kind of the goal on that.
So would that provide like waivers of setbacks and so that they wouldn't have to necessarily have the backyard, front yard easements that they have now?
That's a perfect example, yes. So we've got, as I mentioned, the landscape code coming forward. What we're drafting now, and we've reviewed it with Public Safety and Transportation Committee, with Finance and Economic Development Committees, and gotten this. I know we wanted to talk to municipal facilities, but I think you guys canceled your meeting or something. Anyway. I'm just kidding. So what we want to do is we want to clarify what the landscape buffer width needs to be, because the code is a little fuzzy about that and not very contemporary. We want to clarify the administrative flexibility that exists in the code now, but we want to kind of tighten that up a little bit and make it more clear when we can deviate from the prescriptive requirements of the code by using approaches like buffer averaging and how sound walls kind of play off against berm requirements. We want to clarify, as Councilmember Musser said, how nonconformities would be handled when they're created as a result of this acquisition. We want to, our code has specific height limits on things like walls and fences, which are lower than what sound transit design requirements are, and so we want to clarify that, that we have the authority to work with their requirements for these very specific types of facilities. And then we've got a code section that's been kind of problematic for us for a long time. The way the code reads now is it applies only to single-family residential, but we have the same kind of situation that exists with commercial properties and multifamily properties. So we just want to go in and fix it. It's kind of why you're in there messing with the code. Let's fix this particular section. So we'll be showing you a proposed change to that. As we're developing the landscape code, in the recital section, we believe it's important to kind of set out your policy direction in terms that are understandable to the public and that establish kind of a legislative history for the changes in the ordinance that are kind of more technical, and it's kind of the ordinance itself is kind of like inside baseball. Unless you know really how to read the code and how to interpret that, you don't really kind of understand. You can't really track easily what's being done. So the first is to minimize the impact on private property while helping to make sure that the costs of the Federal Way link extension are not inflated unnecessarily while we engage the neighborhood. And so it's really important to deal with directly affected property owners, minimize project costs in a way that is collaborative with the neighborhood. So that's the first bullet point. The second bullet point is that our code right now says 25-foot buffer on property adjacent to freeways. That's kind of the section of the code. It's not clear what the driver for that code was when it was developed, and Council Member Kaplan may recall that, or it may have just been part of the King County Code, which we just incorporated. When we incorporate that area, it's really unclear. But the approach we're looking at is there a way that we can achieve the kind of aggregate effect of this buffer, of this larger buffer, by using a buffer averaging approach or other techniques which give us an equal or better kind of design outcome?
So would the buffer averaging be specifically for this project, or would it be a benefit to other commercial development? Because I know we've ran into that, getting back to the Woodmont site, for example, we were looking at, landscape buffering, averaging as part of the good neighbor agreement, but I'm curious if this type of change would be specific for this project or
Well,
citywide?
it's the way that we're kind of thinking of it now is for essential public transportation facilities. So it would be this project or the extension of 16th to the 216th or 218th or other projects.
Okay, so, yeah, it's on. So, staff brought these concepts to the Public Safety and Transportation Committee where we had a conversation about them. And really what they're trying to get at is a number of different things. It's balancing things out. There was the discussion about the berm and everything like that. The committee expressed concern about the berm essentially creating a culvert or a gully between the berm and the wall where people could hang out or camp or whatever. And we didn't want that problem. So getting rid of the berm seemed like a good idea. The 20-foot buffer requirement has different impacts on different property owners because of the nature of the property. There are some properties that are going to have to be entire takes, even though they're only taking a small portion of the property would actually be necessary to be able to do what they need to do. The other thing is the additional buffer requirement that we've had in our code would really raise the cost of the land acquisition to Sound Transit. But it's not just Sound Transit, and this is the important part. It's also 509. Both of these right-of-ways are going through this corridor. So with Sound Transit purchasing essentially what amounts to the westernmost portion of the right-of-way that is eventually going to be needed by both Washington State Department of Transportation and Sound Transit in order to build the requirement is a considerable chunk of property. And then they're going to have to make trade-offs with the state in order to accommodate the 509 right-of-way. We had a conversation about whether or not the fence would be, whether it really needs to be a higher sound wall, and the driver on that is going to be 509 more than it's going to be Sound Transit. But even we can require or ask for higher walls if we believe that the impacts are going to be significant. All of those things play into essentially what we went through here. The SEPTED, making sure that this area isn't a problem by design, being able to figure out how the street ends are going to mesh up with the wall, not creating a palette for graffiti and other things like that. We went through all of those things in committee and had conversation about it. So this reflects a lot of what the committee had provided staff in terms of feedback, and they probably got a shorter way of saying it, but I just wanted to explain how that there's been feedback already provided on this, and that a lot of the concerns that we've heard from the community may be addressed by some of these items. One of the things we didn't hear about was the construction access piece of it, which is an excellent question that we didn't even think about, I don't think, when we had the conversation. But anyhow.
So I'd like to add a couple of points here. And that does summarize, our recollection of the conversation we had at committee. The interesting thing about the buffer requirement as it's in the code now is it's very restrictive in how it would be applied. So what we are trying to do is to create flexibility for property owners and Sound Transit as they work through that acquisition process. But what's interesting is there's a kind of a series of people in Pacific Ridge specifically that are impacted by this. There's the direct property owners that would abut the new guideway that will negotiate with Sound Transit for that take or for this buffer. Then you have the people that are indirectly impacted, which are literally right across the street. And then you have kind of the rest of the neighborhood, which is this buffer that's there now that we see when you're up along Pacific Ridge. There's all these trees. That's all going away. It's all going away. And so we're trying to find the balance between this buffer width, impacts to private property owners, impacts to the neighborhood. And so that's why we have these meetings coming up on August 7th and August 14th for the neighborhoods. We've got 2 meetings for 2 different neighborhoods there. And the idea is to kind of vet these issues with those 3 kind of levels of folks that are impacted by this and kind of get some feedback on kind of this idea of averaging. So to give you a sense of what we're talking about is, let's say, for example, Sound Transit negotiates with one property owner who doesn't want any buffer at all, because it would take all of their backyard. They'd rather have just some lawn and then the sound wall. Well, if they want to negotiate that way with that property owner, we'd say, well, okay, somewhere else, you've got to do 50 feet somewhere else with a different property owner. Maybe they're having a whole take somewhere else in that area, and they've got space to put some of that landscaping and trees back in there. So the idea is to kind of get the aggregate space of that buffer along the corridor, but provide that flexibility of where and how that's implemented. So that's kind of the concept of what we're going to talk with the community about, and that's how we've drafted the ordinance. And so we'll see we'll bring that feedback back to council sometime later this summer.
Grant, I just have a question. That is relative to canopy preservation and canopy replacement. How does that get addressed?
Our code requires that for every tree that's removed, 3 trees be added to replace them. With the goal of doing it in the same affected area, but with the option of doing it elsewhere in the city, wherever the city designates, if they can't fit that many trees into this buffer area. So we'll just have to kind of work that out on a case-by-case basis, and there may be 30 or 50 trees that Sound Transit will pay for, and maybe a scout group can plant some of them in Beach Park and some in Saltwater Beach.
My question, is there a way to put together almost like a vegetation abatement fund that they can put the money into, and then maybe we use it, like you're saying, other places in the city?
That's certainly an option that has been discussed as well.
Yeah, this issue has been discussed briefly with the staff. It's still on our to-do list. We haven't really done a deep dive into that, but we know it's on the list. We've talked generally about some ways to kind of address that, and you'll be hearing more about that coming forward.
And I just wanted to mention that because I think Melissa's onto something in terms of the context. Because between the Ecology Fund and looking at kind of canopy throughout the city, ways to kind of make up that difference. I think this is because based on the number of trees that are coming out in order to accommodate these projects, the solution is maybe not a localized, but it's more citywide solution. So I kind of want to highlight that.
Yeah, I do think you're onto something, but I also, whatever we do, we just have to make sure that the interests of the affected property owners are taken care of.
Yes.
But that's a great suggestion.
Just one other thing to note on this slide. The effective noise barrier. Should mention that Sound Transit has entered into an agreement in principle with the SR 509 project to deal with all the freeway, 509, and train noise in one kind of mitigation approach. So, and that will be supported by a noise study that basically gives us kind of reference points and tells us whether this ought to be a 6-foot sound wall or a 12-foot sound wall, based upon the noise that has to be mitigated at a particular point, any particular point along the. I'm sorry, from all three sources, when the trees are removed. So it's a fairly rigorous study. It's in process now, so we'll begin to have a feel for what that tells us. And of course, and we've even put Sound Transit on notice. We may want to get a kind of independent third-party peer review of that work, so we can be completely satisfied that it's solid science.
So Grant, are we relegated to a 6 or a 12?
No.
Okay, because I keep hearing 6 and 12, and
Yeah, it's.
want to make sure that that's not.
Whatever is indicated, a minimum of 6, and it could be 6, 8, 10, 12,
Okay.
14, 16, whatever,
Gonna take
whatever
to
seems
mitigate the noise.
scientifically established.
Yeah, we probably should have pointed out at the beginning of the presentation, we do have Dan Abernathy from Sound Transit here. I apologize for not recognizing you earlier, but Dan's the design manager for Sound Transit on the corridor. So.
Yeah, he's a project director, and he's Dan's kind of counterpart on the, and most of you remember Cahill Ridge. Cahill moved to a different project, and Dan is now the successor project director.
So back to the sound walls, what are the grade differences between I-5, 509 and Sound Transit? And is Sound Transit higher, or is it at grade with 509? Because that will also kind of drive the height of that wall if you're looking for a
That's
sound.
exactly right, and it kind of depends on where you're at in the corridor. So generally speaking, if you're north of 224th, the train is below grade, what we call below Pacific Ridge grade. So the alignment will come underneath 216th, where the bridge goes over I-5 currently, so the alignment's there. And as the alignment hits around 224th, it's about the same grade as the street. And south of there, it begins to elevate, I'll stay on grade, but it'll elevate over Kent Des Moines Road. So that's generally kind of what's going on, and it does impact the height of the wall, sound wall, based on those vertical separations.
But to answer your question specifically, the guideway is above the grade of 509, which is above the grade of, or above or at the grade of I-5.
And is that, in terms of height of our walls, is the goal to have that wall high enough to mitigate the sound off of the guideway?
The idea is to mitigate the noise coming from the freeway 509 and the train.
Okay. Thank you.
The other development regulations, which I referred to, essential public facilities, we have a requirement in our code for an unclassified use permit, which requires kind of almost like a separate EIS and public hearing and noticing process, and it didn't make sense to require Sound Transit to go through that because they've already been through that to a greater extent than what we would be required. So basically, the proposal that's coming forward regarding this project is if you can demonstrate that you've had a rigorous environmental review process and a rigorous public outreach and public hearing process, then the city council would have the authority through a development agreement to approve this land use. So I said, we're picking that essential public facility ordinance back up from, it's been on hold for a year. So we've already done the required public hearing, and now it'll be a continued public hearing, a substitute ordinance, and we'll be able to move through that fairly quickly once we kind of get it put back together again.
And just to clarify, on the eliminating the unnecessary unclassified use permit, that's strictly for essential public facility transportation facilities. And so we wanted to make sure that that was limited strictly to that and not all essential public facilities.
So, as I mentioned, we've got some agreements that we're working on with Sound Transit now. One is a property management plan for their property acquisition. Within about a week to two, they intend to make the first offer on property in this quarter, generally the kind of the northern end of the project through between 216th and 221st. And they have some motivated sellers. And so they expect to quickly reach agreement with some of those property owners and to close and take possession of that property within 90 days. So that makes it very important for us to have this kind of coordinated property management plan in place, because we don't want folks to hand the keys off to Sound Transit, walk away, and all of a sudden now we have an abandoned house that becomes a law enforcement or a public nuisance problem. So we've been working with the Sound Transit staff to have a plan to come in and basically remove those houses like right away. So they have standby contracts in place, take them out, remove whatever is there, restore the site to a level kind of condition so that it doesn't become a public nuisance or law enforcement issue. And so once they own it, then it will be Sound Transit property, and the Sound Transit law enforcement folks or King County Sheriff's Office will be working closely with our PD and our community service officers on making sure that we have really good coordination on that as we move through. And we've set up a fast track process issuing the demolition permits with our building department to get that stuff done fairly quickly. We also have what I mentioned, the franchise agreement, which was referred to as a Transitway agreement that provides for operations of the light rail system through Des Moines, and then the development agreement, which basically has a bunch of, development agreement boilerplate, as these things typically do, but also incorporates either directly or by reference the request for proposals, the permitting processes, anything that will involve the city, and it's kind of our kind of commitments to each other on how this project moves forward in a coordinated way. And then that development agreement will be incorporated into the RFP, probably by reference or as an attachment, in much the same way as we incorporated the development agreement with the Port of Seattle for Des Moines Creek Business Park, and it became part of Panettone's contract. So to make sure that we've got good kind of three-party coordination once the design builder is selected through the Sound Transit process. So that concludes kind of our update.
I want to add a couple other thoughts just real quick to give you an example of something that we've been working on at the staff level with them is maintenance of traffic. Just kind of give a little bit of detail, dive a little bit deeper. So at certain parts of the construction of this project, there's some significant work that has to occur, specifically at Kent Des Moines Road, for example, where the guideway is installed over the roadway. So we're working with them on, okay, when that happens, the road is closed. They don't want to be hanging girders over live traffic and pedestrians walking underneath that. So we're talking with them about, okay, if you're going to close Kent Des Moines Road, when does that occur? How long is the closure? Can we do it on weekends? Can we do it at night? How do you deal with getting pedestrians from Des Moines, for example, over to the park and ride area? How are we going to deal with that? And so we're talking about those kinds of things. And we're putting in specific days or events, because we have a lot of special events on the weekends where, okay, Waterland Parade, fireworks, you're not doing a weekend closure when we have certain special events. So we've been trying to coordinate on those kind of details. All of that would go into the request for proposals that the contractor would then understand exactly, if you're gonna close a road, here are the parameters of what that looks like. Same thing with 216th. 216th will be closed over I-5 as they do some of the guideway work underneath. Essentially, we'll call it a tunnel, but it's not really a tunnel. It's just a big culvert, basically, under the road. That road will have to be closed and dealt with at times. So the other main closure is up in SeaTac, where the guideway will go over Highway 99. Right at the same point where eventually 509 will go underneath Pacific Highway. So if you can kind of imagine this 3D kind of problem with all of the utilities and bridges. And so we're trying to deal with what happens when you close Pac Highway, and where, we don't want traffic detoured for months over onto 24th. So, and SeaTac doesn't want it over on Military Road. So we're trying to work through some of those kind of arrangements for weekend closures, night closures, to kind of facilitate some of those kind of impacts. So that's just kind of one little piece that kind of gives you a little bit deeper dive as to some of the detail that we're working with Sound Transit on. And the last comment I have is I just want to, for people, residents or people in the community that have concerns, like the gentleman we heard from tonight, we have a team here that can help. Lynn Madsen is kind of our primary point for those kinds of questions. He's kind of the liaison that's working with Sound Transit on project-related impacts. Grant is helping us more on the policy-related work here on these agreements. But you can always contact me or Brandon or Susan or Michael or the mayor, any of the council members, and we'd be happy to hear what your concerns are and try to facilitate that conversation with Sound Transit to kind of resolve those issues or make sure that they're addressed. So,
Just in summary, I think from the public comments we heard earlier, I think all of them are being addressed as we work on the roadway-related parts of the project requirements. So we may not resolve them to the satisfaction of each of the neighborhoods, each of the property owners, but each of them are being seriously worked.
So that brought up two issues. Number one, we have a 224th project, but it only goes as far east as 29th?
30th.
It does go to 30th. Okay, so would Sound Transit relative to, if they're using 224th as access, then is there an expectation in terms of the roadway there?
Well, on all of the haul routes, there's a couple of different ways we're looking at potential impacts to the road surface. So we think that the majority of the main haul routes will just have to be overlaid when the work is done. There may be other impacts because of hauling activities that aren't specifically on haul route that we'll address. One of the things that Sound Transit is underway with right now is they're doing a pavement condition in study on all of the haul routes, not just in Des Moines, but along the corridor. So we'll have that data up front. We'll know what their data shows, and we'll be able to compare it to our data to say, yeah, that kind of jives with what we're thinking right now. And then we'll reassess that when the project's over, and where mitigation is necessary, they'll overlay the roads. As far as, one of the things that came up tonight was you heard, well, there's not really any shoulders right now, so we have people walking in the road. So if we're going to use something as a haul route, maybe that's something that has to be mitigated, where a shoulder's widened or there's some space provided for pedestrians along that haul route where we will have trucks coming and going. And so those are things that we'll continue to work with Sound Transit on.
And then the other question is land use related, and it gets back to Councilmember Back's question. Council referred or requested staff come back with an ordinance considering rezone of the southern portion of Pacific Ridge from, I don't know if we drew a line or not, or approximately, and I assume that's something that we'll be seeing
Well, we've talked briefly several months ago with the Finance and Econ Committee about that request. It's on our work program. It's, near the top of things. Right now, we're focused on the EPF ordinance that Grant mentioned. We've got some SEPA thresholds work that we're doing, and that should come forward to council in September. We're also working with Department of Ecology and our consultant on some of the shoreline changes that we talked about related to the Wasson property. So those are some of the policy work that we're underway with right now, and we're having trouble just kind of managing that, just given all the development activity that's going on. So that's where we're at, but it is on our list.
This was just an opportunity for you to be able to demonstrate all the stuff you're working on.
Yeah. Let me add to the list, okay. That's clearly something that we intend to get to, but kind of given what Dan was describing, additionally, that's not quite as simple a process, excuse me, as one might expect based on the fact that there was a planned action done in Pack Ridge area. And so the potential impact based on land use changes to that planned action has to also be a consideration in how this all gets. So it may not just be as simple as a rezone, which isn't simple to start with, but there may be other factors associated with that need to be done. Just so that there's clear expectation of what's involved in doing it. And clearly it is, I think I said even the last meeting, that as far as we were concerned, that is a priority, along with some other priorities. And part of the process that we're hoping with the budget retreat is to revisit some of the work plans so we can reestablish kind of what the priorities are going to be for the different committees. Sorry.
And I'll note, in recent conversation, I think moving towards the budget conversations, the staff will be working with the various committees to come up with a draft of what the upcoming work plan is for the coming year. And because there's been a lot of work done this year, but I have the impression that all committees have residual on their list. We didn't get through everything. And so, plus the fact with all of the work that's going on and all the projects that are going on around the city, staff needs to come back and help us understand what the priorities are that they have so we can make sure that we're meeting the expectations and keeping all the projects on their project timelines. So I'm expecting that over the next, is it
3 weeks or so?
3 weeks or so, that at least draft proposals will be developed for the committees to bring forward into the budgeting process. Now, they're draft, but.
If I could just add one more comment in response to the public comment. I think thinking the kind of worst-case scenario, you could see hundreds of tons of steel and concrete and select fill kind of turning off a highway up 224th to the project site. That's not going to happen. The major deliveries of steel, concrete, select fill is going to come from the east side, from the WashDOT side. They're not going to be coming through our neighborhood. So I think we'll try to communicate that a little more clearly on the plan, but they're going to have, the project's going to have kind of complete access to the construction area from the WashDOT side. They'll be clearing and grubbing that whole area, developing their own kind of local access. So they're not planning to bring concrete truck after concrete truck or deliver semis of rail track and other things up through the neighborhood. That's going to all come from the east side of the project.
There will be some, but to the point, the majority of it will be.
He's covering all bases.
Light stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's funny.
Thank you for the very detailed update. I'm going to pass the mic right now to Councilmember Musser.
So the item we've all been wondering about, so the elephant in the room, the cupcake in the room. I would like everyone to join me in singing happy birthday to our Parks and Rec Director, Patrice Thorell. And we brought cupcakes to celebrate. So, yeah. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Patrice. Happy birthday to you. There might be enough for everybody, but it might be close, so dig in, whoever is dying for a cupcake. Yeah, come Patrice.
I already had my cupcake.
Rob already had his cupcake.
Yeah. At least 72 hours. Well, I think what we ought to do is,
5-minute briefing.
so, I think what we'll do is, we'll take 5, and then the council will go into executive session for the purpose of the executive session will be to discuss property acquisition per RCW 42.30.1101B. The executive session will be expected to last approximately 20 minutes. There will be no formal action taken at the conclusion of the executive session, but if you grab a cupcake, you don't have to run out the door. Feel free to sit down and enjoy it. So, anyway, at this time, we'll take a quick break and then we'll head in.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.